Hey everybody, it's Kory. Thanks for joining me. So I have great news. California is actually growing again. That's right. All those stories you've been hearing over the last several years about hundreds of thousands of people fleeing California, it's not true. In fact, you can see from the governor's page right here. Check this out. California's population is increasing. More people are moving to California, and the state's population is expected to continue to experience positive growth. What Governor Newsom said. People from across the nation and the globe are coming to the Golden State to pursue the California dream and experience the success of the world's fifth largest economy. From the Inland Empire to the Bay Area, regions throughout California are growing, strengthening local communities and boosting our state's future. Okay, so that's from Governor Gavin Newsom and the California government website. But as Paul Harvey would say, it's time for the rest of the story. So this is a slide showing California's population growth for the year 2024, according to the US Census. Yes, they had a positive rate of growth, which was 0.6%, still below the national average of 0.9%. They had a total population growth of 232,570. Sounds great, right? Well, how did they get there? Well, 47% of it, 110,000 of it, was from natural change. What is that? That's your ratio between births and deaths. California had 110,000 more births than it had deaths. Now, as far as domestic migration, this is interstate migration, people coming and going from and to California. They ended up with a negative 239,000 domestic migration. People left the state by almost 240,000 people. But yet they still had a total population growth. How did that happen? Look right here at the international migration. They had 361,000 international migrants come into the state of California in the year 2024. That erased all the 240 that left the state, and combined with the births gave them a total population growth of 232,000. So, a little bit different than what Governor Gavin Newsom was saying, where he said people were coming to California from throughout the nation and throughout the globe. I think a fair assessment would say people are coming to California through the womb and over the border. So there you have it. I just showed you, by using California as an example, how we're going to break down the top 10 fastest growing states in the country by percentage rate for the year 2024. And obviously, Idaho is in that list, and this is an Idaho-centric channel. Duh, it's called Live Better in North Idaho, and I make no excuses about promoting Idaho and North Idaho when I get the chance. And I'm going to show you, as we look at all 10 of these states and break down the type of growth that they had, that Idaho is different than the other 10. Let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to count down the top 10 fastest growing states by percentage rate for 2024. At number 10, we have Arizona. It had a growth rate of 1.5%. Ranked by volume, they were number 8. The 8th most voluminous growth came in the state of Arizona. Their total population growth for the year was 109,000. Their natural change, remember this is more births than deaths, they had 9,660 more births than deaths. That was 9% of their growth. Their domestic migration, they had almost 35,000. That was 32% of their growth. And international migration, they had 64,486. 59% of Arizona's growth was due to international migration. At number 9, we have Delaware. They had a 1.5% growth rate. They had 15,494 total population growth. Their natural change, they actually had 21 more deaths than they had births. So basically 0% natural change there. Their domestic migration, they had 8,155 people move into the state from other states. That was 53% of their growth. And their international migration was 7,283, or 47%. North Carolina, they came in at number 8 as the fastest growing state with 1.5% growth rate. They ranked number 4 for volume. Only 3 other states had higher growth population totals for 2024. They had 165,000 total growth. It broke down to 12,632 more births than deaths, or 8% of their growth. Domestic migration was 82,000, or half of their growth. And then their international migration was basically 70,000 with 42%. Sitting here at number 7, we have Idaho, a 1.5% growth rate. They ranked number 30 in volume. We had 30,497 total population change. 6,195 was due to more births than deaths. That was 20% of our growth. Domestic migration, 16,383. 54% of our growth came from people moving in from other states. And international migration, we had 7,899, or 26% of our growth due to international migration. Coming in at number 6 was Nevada. They had a 1.7% growth rate. They ranked number 19th in the United States for their growth volume. They had 53,104 total population growth. Natural change, they had 3,000 more births than deaths. That was 6% of their growth. Their domestic migration was 16,853, or 32% of their total growth. And their international migration was 33,000, and that was 62% of their total population growth. Coming in at number 5, we have South Carolina. They had a growth rate of 1.7%. Their rank by volume was number 10. They had a total population growth of 91,000. They had a net loss of lives in the natural category. They had more deaths, 517 more deaths than they had births. So they had a negative 1% growth rate there for natural. Domestic migration, they had 68,043. 75% of their growth came from migrating people from other states. And international migration, they had 23,234, or 26% of their total population growth for the year. Coming in at number 4, fastest rate growth in the United States was Utah, 1.8%. They're ranked by total volume. They were the 16th most voluminous growth for 2024. They had 60,391. Check this out. Their natural change, they had almost 24,000 more births than deaths. It accounted for 40% of their growth. Their domestic migration, a lot lower than you would think. They only had 3,220 people move to Utah from other states. That was 5% of their growth. And this one shocked me too. Their international migration was 33,000, or 55% of their growth. Coming in at number 3, we have Texas with a 1.8% growth rate. By volume, they were the number 1 top growth population state in the country. They had 563,000 people growth in Texas for 2024. Of that, 158,753 was due to more births than deaths. That's 28% of their growth. Their domestic migration only accounted for 15% of their growth. It was 85,000, was still the most domestic migration that we saw. But most of their growth came from international migration. No surprise there, being on the border. 319,000 people internationally migrated to Texas. That was 57% of their growth. Number 2, Florida. Rank number 2 for the growth rate at 2%. Ranked by volume, they were number 2. They had a total population growth of 467,347. Their natural change, they had more deaths than births, and this makes sense. It's the number 1 state for retirees. So they actually saw 7,321 more deaths than births. They had a natural change of a negative net 2%. Their domestic migration was 64,000. This was actually lower than South Carolina, you guys. You'd have lost that bet if I asked you which state actually saw more domestic migration, Florida or South Carolina. South Carolina saw more. But anyway, back to Florida, 64,017. Only 14% of their growth came from domestic migration. And if you're sitting in Florida, you're thinking, man, we're getting bombarded by all these northeastern states moving down here. Well, no. Your growth down there in Florida is only 14% due to people coming from other states. Where most of your growth is coming, and this shocked me, is international migration. They had 411,000 people from other countries migrate to Florida in 2024. It accounted for 88% of their total population growth. And then number one, although it's not a state, the census included it as a jurisdiction. It's the fastest growth rate of all the states and jurisdictions in the United States. They had a growth rate of 2.2%, ranked by volume 36. Their total population growth for the district was 14 or basically 15,000. Natural change due to 2,761 more births than deaths. It was 18%. Their domestic migration, they lost people from their state to other states by a tune of 337 for a negative 2%. Their growth came from where? International migration. 84% of their growth came from international migrants, 12,502 of them. So there you have it, the top 10 fastest growing states by percentage rate according to the US Census in 2024. But why did we make such a big deal out of international migration? Well, for one, the US Census states that net international migration drove the highest US population growth in decades. And you can check out that article on the US Census website. They then went on to say that the Census Bureau had to improve their methodology to better estimate the increase in net international migration. Why did they need to do that? Well, they state in this article that in the last 3 years, there's been a notable increase in the number of refugees, U.S. Border Patrol releases, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection Office of Field Operations parolees. To account for this increase, we utilize new, reliable monthly administrative data on these humanitarian migrant cases from the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program and the Office of Homeland Security Statistics to enhance the estimates of non-U.S. born immigration described above. You guys, they struggled and they had to revise their historical data. Check this out. This is a graph showing the foreign-born immigration estimates and how they had to revise them. So what you're looking at is 2010 through 2024. And this blue line, we're going to start here. This is, as they notified here, foreign-born immigration unadjusted. This is what they've been reporting in the U.S. Census for the last 14 years. Well, when it came to 2021, with the new Biden administration at the time, their data got all wompy, and they had to go in and readjust for humanitarian immigration. And they adjusted their foreign-born immigration, and you can show how they adjusted it with this dotted line. And you can see here from 2021, the undocumented humanitarian immigrants had to be increased from what they originally had reported. So get this, 22, 23, and 24, the U.S. Census actually documented in their U.S. Census report each of those years these numbers. Well, in 24, they had to go in and revise. Funny how they did it at the end of the current administration, but I'll let that be for another day. They actually increased the humanitarian immigration quite significantly. That's what this blue graph dictates, is humanitarian migrants. And if you look at what they reported originally and what they currently have revised it to, it's drastic. So let's pause and remind ourselves of something here. The U.S. Census has struggled over the last 3 to 4 years in keeping up with the undocumented migration that's come over our borders. It's very easy to articulate natural growth, right? You take your birth certificates and your death certificates, and the sum of those gives you your natural growth. It's also very easy to articulate domestic migration. You simply look at DMV records. Where are people getting their driver's licenses? When they move from one state to another, they turn in their old driver's license and they get a new driver's license with their new state. You also, when you file your taxes, you're filing your taxes from the state in which you reside. So it's very easy to find out about domestic migration. International migration, on the other hand, is quite dynamic. You have your legal status, which over the last 4 years during the Biden administration, the term legal was expanded to include so much. And then you have illegal, and illegal is broken down to those that are observed and those that are not observed. So you always hear the term gotaways. Well, the gotaways are those that were observed either physically or digitally. A gotaway can be observed by an immigration officer, or it can be observed through a camera or through a sensor. A gotaway is observed crossing into the border but yet was not apprehended. And then you have the unknowns, and those are those that were never picked up by observation that entered into the country. And it is with those dynamics that the US Census admits they have a hard time identifying the number of migrants that came into our country and therefore articulating those on the state numbers. So I think it's safe to assume that when we talk about international migration for these top 10 states or any of our states, those migrant numbers are severely under-articulated. The other reason that we make such a big deal out of international migration is that it actually impacts state and local budgets. Check this out. The Congressional Budget Office did a detailed report in July of 2024 titled "The Effects of the Immigration Surge on the Federal Budget and the Economy." It's a fascinating article, and I encourage you to research it. But in this article, the CBO, or Congressional Budget Office, says this. They say in a paragraph where they titled "The Effects of the Immigration Surge on State and Local Governments' Spending and Revenues," they state this: "The research literature has generally found that increases in immigration raise state and local government spending, particularly on education, healthcare, and housing, more than their revenues." So if I can take the liberty to reinterpret what that paragraph just said, the Congressional Budget Office is saying that immigration as a whole is a net drain on the revenues of both state and local governments, a net drain. So if you take these top 10 states and you see, as we're about to see, if most of them are heavy on the immigrant growth compared to the domestic or natural growth, chances are they're draining their budgets. So let's take a look at, of these top 10 states, which of them were heavy on immigrant growth. So this is a slide showing the top 10 fastest growing states by percentage rate. And what you see in each of these columns is the percentage of growth by foreign immigration. So for example, Florida, 88% of its population growth in 2024 was from foreign immigration, 88%. District of Columbia, although not a state, it was included in the census data as a state or jurisdiction. 84% of their growth was foreign immigration. And if you look, each of these states, 6 of the top 10 states, were heavier on foreign immigration than they were on the other two types of growth combined. They were higher in immigration growth than in domestic growth and natural growth. Only 4, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Idaho, were less dependent on foreign immigration for their growth. 2, the bottom 2, South Carolina and Idaho, had the least amount of foreign immigration of all the 10 fastest growing states. Furthermore, when we take that same rate of 26% and we compare that to the total population growth for each state, Idaho and South Carolina, Idaho comes out with fewer international migrants by about 2/3. And then I included California and New York here just so you can see their percentage of growth by foreign immigration. Again, California, 155% of their growth comes from foreign immigration, and then New York beats them out with 159. And again, why is this important? Because chances are it's going to reflect on their state and local budgets. So there you have it. Those are the top 10 fastest growing states in 2024 according to percentage of growth rate. And Idaho made that list. It makes that list every year. But I argue that Idaho is different than the other 9 on that list of most aggressive growth, both in the volume and in the type. So let's talk about the type. The type of growth that Idaho experiences, as we saw in that graph, only Idaho and South Carolina had 26% of their growth due to national migration. The others had exceedingly more growth due to international migration. Now, as it comes to the volume, again, if you took the domestic migration and that category alone, that's people bringing their U-Hauls into Idaho, Idaho would rank number 10 on the list. It would still make the top 10 list of states seeing U-Hauls coming into them. But the other 9, there are way more U-Hauls going into those states compared to Idaho. And let me just demonstrate using my cheat sheet. And again, guys, this is the Excel spreadsheet that I got off of the Census website, and you can download that as well and verify what I'm telling you. There were 9 states that had more domestic migration than Idaho. So, for example, Idaho had 16,000 domestic migrants come in. So if we could just categorize this as U-Hauls, right? Idaho saw 16,000 U-Hauls come into the state. Alabama had 26,000. Arizona had 35,000. Florida had 64,000 U-Hauls come in to its state. Jumping over to the next page. Nevada had 17,000 U-Hauls. North Carolina had 82,000 U-Hauls. South Carolina had 68,000 U-Hauls. Tennessee had 48,000 U-Hauls. And Texas had 85,000. So compared to Idaho's 16,000 domestic migrants, you can see the considerable difference in volume for the other 9 that ranked above it. So I want to caution people about categorizing Idaho's growth with the other higher demand, higher volume states that are growing. Idaho's different in the volume that it gets much less volume, and in the type of growth, it gets much less international migration coming to the state. So there you have it. Just a breakdown of those top 10 states and an argument for how Idaho is a little bit different than those states. You guys, if you have questions about moving to North Idaho, we would love to be a resource for you. There's a link in the description below. I will personally answer your questions. If you want to email us, we can do a phone call or a Zoom call and get your questions answered, your specific questions that you have related to living better here in North Idaho. That's it for now, you guys. Thanks for following. Bye now. If we haven't met yet, I'm Kory Martinelli. My wife Bonnie and I own a local real estate team based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Our personal journey to live better began in 2009 when we relocated our young family to North Idaho from Ventura County, California. We wanted to raise our family in a place rich with outdoor recreation and in a culture that treasured our strong conservative values. Leaving family, friends, and church was not easy. Perhaps the scariest decision was to leave behind 21 years as a deputy sheriff with Ventura County and finish my career with a new agency. But I did it and finished serving out my 3 decades in law enforcement as a deputy with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department right here in North Idaho. While I was doing the easy part, working in law enforcement, Bonnie diligently raised our 2 children, battled breast cancer into remission, and started her real estate career part-time. Talk about a winner. After retiring from law enforcement in 2016, I joined Bonnie in real estate and we went full-time forming the Martinelli Realty team and this video channel. Since then, we have successfully navigated one of the most aggressive and competitive real estate markets in America to help over 300 families relocate to North Idaho. In that time, Bonnie has been recognized as one of the top 1% producing real estate professionals in the entire country. It is this experience that we have gained in the market that forms the foundation of our videos. If you are wondering if you can live better in North Idaho, we dedicate this channel to you.